First of all, it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce our first discussion guest, Joerg WUTTKE. He's the Chief Representative of BASF in China. In his role, he's responsible for guiding the company's investment strategies for China, negotiating large projects and government relations. He is also the president of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China, and he has actually been living in China for 40 years, 40. He went to Shanghai in 1982 to study Chinese. He later studied Chinese in Taipei, and he has been there pretty much ever since. He has worked for ABB, and he has joined BASF in 1997. Joerg is the chairman of the China Task Force of the Business and Industry Advisory Committee of the OECD, and is a member of the advisory board of the Mercator Institute of China Studies, Germany's foremost think tank on China in Berlin. Joerg, a welcome to you in Beijing. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I rather wish I would be in Stein am Rhein, but you know, things are not happening this way.
As I mentioned, we will have a discussion among us, so whenever you have a question, as always, just give me a sign. And maybe just to start with, Joerg, because you know some media outlets were kind of excited throughout the night. Social media was lighting up that there were some rumors around the position of Xi Jinping. Can you give us a first-hand assessment of the situation from Beijing?
Well, I thought for a moment to put on a flak jacket and a helmet to spice up your daytime in Switzerland, but it is really a rumor. The president is back from Central Asia. He's in quarantine. Obviously, you can't see him there, but there's nothing to the fact that there is a coup or anything of that sort. He's fully in charge of not only the sword, as they see it, meaning the security forces, but certainly also fully in charge of the pen, meaning propaganda. So no change, definitely. And in October 16th afterwards, he will be reinstated a third time. It's something I have in common with him because I've been now third time president of the European Chamber.
Do you also aim to be lifetime president of the European Chamber?
I stepped I stepped down in May on advice of the Articles of Association and the strong advice from my wife. So May it is the end of 10 years of heading this organization.
So Joerg, you published a report with the Chamber just last week, and in that report you wrote that in China today, ideology is trumping the economy. Ideology trumps economy. Can you elaborate a bit more what is going on, and you know, in terms of the economic situation in China right now?
Well, I was very keen to have the Trump in there, the word Trump, and in order to indicate that actually we have lost our irrational economic behavior in the Chinese leadership. We are driven by zero tolerance. We are driven by a lot of ideological measures. So the old, really reliable policymaking of the Communist Party and the administration is a bit out. So we're lamenting the fact that predictability, reliability is questionable now, and efficiency is down. All three were actually the hallmark of the success of this nation over the last 40 years. And just to elaborate a little bit more on that one, as zero tolerance is really causing problems, not just coming in and out, 7 + 3 days, normally it turns into 11 days, but also traveling within China is really challenging. We have a couple of cities in semi-lockdown, and of course now we're in the silly season here in Beijing, and hence to get into Beijing is really a challenge. And that has an impact on international investors. So I'm trying to showcase what it does to us. And of course, I'm trying to showcase how important China is to us. As this paper again has 430 pages, and believe it or not, 1,000 recommendations.
Now this zero tolerance policy on COVID, with lockdowns here and there, do you see any signs that the government is finding a way to get rid of that policy, or to open up and let the economy breathe again?
Well, China had a stellar success over the first 2 years. Really, they did extremely well, safeguarding the population. They had a very high rate of vaccination in 2020, end of 2020, beginning 2021. But again, zero tolerance buys you time in order to then get the population ready to create herd immunity, but that didn't take place. So the world is going back to normal. Semi-normal in many ways, but China is stuck in this fear of the COVID. Vaccinations are down from 20, 30 million people a day down to 1 million. And again, no vaccination, no opening up the country. I'm fully with the Chinese government. You cannot open the country now. The health system would not cope with that. But at the same time, you ask yourself, how come the health system doesn't actually is able to cope with this? How come that they are so afraid of that? So we are testing like there's no tomorrow, every 3 days. One round of testing costs the cool, I would say, 1 billion renminbi. That is about, in essence, 200, altogether 200 million US dollars every week for the city of Shanghai, for example. So incredible cost. And that's just the testing in the lab, it's not the people. So in a way, lots of money wasted on the wrong locations. And I see no easing. China needs a better vaccination program. They have no mRNA. The population is mostly vaccinated with 2 shots. The 3rd shot is lacking, and a new shot is not in the books. And mRNA has been walking away. BioNTech is fed up. So we have no resolution there. So best case among the immunologists, best case for China opening up with responsibility is October next year.
October next year, 23.
Yeah.
But I mean, you said zero COVID was a success in the first 2 years. It was popular as well. Isn't now the mood in the population changing, that actually people are fed up with the rolling lockdowns?
Well, again, keep in mind that people are not really informed about how the world has been coming back to normal. Still, CGTN, Xinhua always report on the negative things, increasing cases in the US, the kind of deaths related to this, totally disregarding the proportion and totally disregarding that actually countries like India are totally back to normal, no mask, no nothing. So in a way, China is an outlier, as is North Korea. Again, that's really worrisome, and it changes the perception of headquarters of how they see China. And that's the thing I'm worried about. As chairman of this chamber, we are interested in more investment. So I was digging in the figures in order to actually get a bit of attention from the leadership, because everything is fine over here when you talk to the people in public. But if you talk to the prime minister in private, as I had the privilege of doing so in May, and other ministers, you can sense there is a worry. There is a sense of urgency. I give you 2 data sets that tells you of where we are right now. China, in essence, always had between 8 and 10 billion euro of investment from foreign Europeans, that excludes Switzerland, obviously, European investors, 8 to 10 billion. So they're celebrating this increase of FDI in the first half. But the increase of the FDI in the first half is basically one company, it's BMW, buying out billions, 3.6 billion euro. So what we have realized with Rhodium over the last 4 years is that the top 10 European companies that used to stay for 50%, 45, 50% of European investment here are now standing for 75 to 80%. So my company is included, of course. We have a $10 billion project under construction in Guangdong. So the top 10 are big and remain big and will remain big. But where are all the other 1,000 companies? They put their local organizations on autopilot. They keep going, building in China, for China, localization. And then you look into the investment of Europe into the People's Republic of China. And then you benchmark it with a similar sized economy, say the United States. So again, 8 to 10 billion into China. And last year, Europe invested 160 billion into the United States. So at this stage, we are investing more into Texas than into China. Or put it this way, Sweden is investing more in the United States than the European Union is in China. There is a complete underinvestment. And that flies in the face of our politicians in Berlin and Brussels that say we are too dependent on China. As a matter of fact, we are not too dependent on China. And then the second point, sorry for talking so long, Mark, but it's an export, the market. The market is very big. Obviously, the market is big. The economy is big. But we have been selling in the first half of last year 100 billion euro into the Chinese economy. This year, first half, 100 billion. So flat. China has been exporting 200 billion last year, first half, and now 300 billion. So China is really, really successful in exporting. Europeans love Chinese products. And what it does to China is it's 2.2% of GDP and it's 14 million jobs. So in a way, not we in Europe are dependent on China. China is dependent on us. It's 14 million jobs on the line in China based on European consumers. And then, believe it or not, we are selling into China just 24% more as European Union companies than into Switzerland. And with all due respect, your economy is not really big.
I have a question here.
Hi, this is Tanja Stadler. I'm from ETH Zurich, and I was involved also in a COVID response here in Switzerland. And so my question is about the zero tolerance strategy in China. I agree with you at the start. They did very well compared to a lot of European countries. I guess the goal, or we always thought their goal is to vaccinate the population to open up. They have a vaccine, I agree with you, mRNAs are better. I guess there are some also reasons for the country, China, they don't want to have, say, this quote-unquote Western vaccine. However, what appears to me is that their vaccines are not that bad either. And they seem to be a country, they could just vaccinate the whole country if they wanted. They can also lock up people so in lockdown. So they could vaccinate. So what is their reason to not have more faith in their vaccine and just vaccinate the whole country and move on? First question. And the second one, when you said they might open up by next fall, is there a strategy or are they just opening up and then have an overwhelm in the hospitals? Thanks.
Well, again, their vaccine has been administered with 2 shots and 2 shots not good enough. Some people, say 50% had 3 shots. And 3 shots is pretty good. Sinopharm is a really good vaccine. So people are partly really in good shape. But again, it doesn't really cover the new mutations of Omicron as BioNTech does with BA4 and BA5. And the question we have is, why do you actually gamble with the health of the population by not just getting mRNA produced in Shanghai, licensed by BioNTech? Of course, it's nationalism. They cannot admit the fact that at this stage they rely on the European vaccination. So in a way, we have a situation right now where immunologists and doctors here have been calculating that you need about 6 to 9 months to really come up with this kind of production of an mRNA-like vaccine. And then you have to educate the people, and then you have to train the nurses and the doctors how to do this. And that takes then all the way more than 10 to 11 months at least. So in a way, October is sort of a calculation. Of course, it moves on. So the mRNA is the gold standard. So why don't people like it? Well, first of all, there's no need for it. We hardly have any Omicron here. Zero tolerance worked in the heads of the people. And there's always this feedback on long COVID damages in the US, then problems that were happening in Europe. So people are having fear of getting vaccinated. And then on top of it, you have 60 and above that have not been vaccinated in the first rounds, explicitly 60 and below. And in Germany, we started with a 100-year-old lady. So the way that the people are very suspicious, how come that, you know, the first batch went without 60 and above? It was very good that the Politburo about 2 months ago said that we have all been vaccinated. Most of them are above 60. It was a good sign. And I thought, now really gets going. Nothing happened. So in a way, people are reluctant for many reasons. And China, surprisingly, they can manage to tell the people how to think, but not how to vaccinate.
Thank you. I have the next question over here.
你好，我叫韩露 I'm Chinese, so currently living and working in Switzerland from Siemens. Apparently, it looks like you have a higher tolerance than me, and because I just came back to China for 4 months, and it was not that easy to go through those zero tolerance towards the COVID. But my question will not relate to COVID situation. And currently there are more and more localization happen for those Western or European companies in China. So they are really changing the local CEO or representative to Chinese. And also Siemens, China CEO just changed to Dr. Xiao, probably also know him. My question is, being a country China representative for BASF, what is your view? What is a key advantage and being 老外, for foreigner, and then leading Chinese, leading this whole of this group, or what other key disadvantage and being foreigners leading in China?
Well, of course, my Chinese peers are able managers. They have been not only managing organizations in China, most of them actually managed outside China. So they have a lot of international experience. I mean, in many ways, it makes sense to have a Chinese national as a head of a major organization over here. I mean, we are all basically 99% localized. SMEs more, the big ones are somewhere at 98%. BASF, we have about 14,000 people, and it's about 150 foreigners when you take aside this $10 billion project. So in a way, understandably, but at the same time, I think that's also a worry because the connection to the headquarters is receding. Traveling, as you pointed out, and you're the brave one, because I haven't been back in Europe since nearly 2.5 years, means that companies are looking elsewhere. Now, again, the top 10 means top 10 European companies, primarily are 3 car companies, is BASF, is Bosch, and 5 other Europeans that are really pouring in billions of dollars. Again, doing this in a magnitude which is surprisingly low if you compare it with the United States. So what happens now is that companies the CEOs are looking elsewhere for many reasons. It is not only the tedious procedure to getting into China, but also China has reputational problems, has supply chain problems. Shanghai went down, Ningbo went down. What is next? Dalian went down. And we have this whack-a-mole. You never know which city is going to go down next. The second is, of course, supply chain legislation in the US is really a challenge for us. Europe is coming up with legislation. So there's burden upon burden. And again, Chinese economy is really soft, 0.4% in the second quarter. I expect less than 1% for the third quarter. So we will barely reach 3% this year as GDP, but only because we had a really, really good first quarter. So China is limping along, real estate crisis, the damage to the private enterprise last year. So in a way, the economy is really soft. So at this stage, companies think 5 times before putting more money into the region. And that's what happens. Our CEOs are flying happily to Thailand and Singapore. We have a huge conference in Singapore with the German Chancellor, our economic minister, as well as Mr. Bush will be there as APA chairman. And then, of course, I can't go because I have to face quarantine coming back. So in a way, when they go to Singapore, of course, they first go to Vietnam, they go to Jakarta, they go to other places. So China involuntarily opens the doors for European business in other cities, countries around Asia. And that's not funny for me because China has a huge potential, and China now runs the risk of punching below its economic weight. And so that's why it became a little bit more noisy than normal last week with this launching of the position paper, because there's a certain complacency here. Oh, we can do self-reliance, we're a big economy, and so on, disregarding the success story over the last 30 years, where China really shined and sparkled by opening up and being globalized champion.
Like if we take this longer term view throughout your career, you have seen the years of reform and opening up. You have seen the years that led up to the accession of China into the WTO, the reforms, when basically the world economy grew more and more together. And now we have more fragmentation. We have within China less private enterprise, more regulation, a more ideological shift. Yeah. Where is this leading us? I mean, are we looking at a world economy that is drifting apart again?
Well, clearly China is isolated. China is still export champion. Again, they have these incredible clusters that are impossible to replace, and in particular in the Yangtze Delta and Pearl Delta River area. And so China will be remain a strong exporter. China is a very weak importer, and China is a really underachiever in foreign direct investment. You know, we have always this jubilation in Beijing about huge investment coming into China, happens to be 75% from Hong Kong. And the majority of that is return money from China itself. As a matter of fact, the total share of investment from Europe last year into the Chinese economy is 3.8%, utilized 0.9% coming from Germany. How is that possible? And so in a way, again, it looks wonderful and charming, but it's totally below potential of the Chinese economy. And that worries me because they seem to actually are fine with that. And Siemens, BASF, Volkswagen, we cannot be satisfied with that, of course, because we see more potential in this country. Again, keep in mind, last year, China, the investment into the United States by European companies, and now I include Switzerland, just to be fair to you guys, as well as Britain, was 230 billion euro. Into China, eight. And so in a way, the stock of European investment since decades has reached 160 billion euro. So what I'm saying is that we as Europeans invest in US in 1 year what we have invested in China in 20 to 30 years. And now to give you a total different perspective, guess who is the biggest investor in the economy of Taiwan? It's the European Union. So again, we have a stock of investment in the mainland of 160, and you won't believe it, but we have a stock of investment in the Taiwanese economy at 45 billion euro, you know? And so you look at the size of their economy and the size of the mainland, and you go like, what? How is this possible? So again, people are always very happy of the little crumbs that fell off the table where they can nourish on. Again, the top 10, including, I guess, Siemens, will always be at the forefront and hang on there. But what I'm worried about is that China presently is losing its way of attracting companies to come here. Companies go elsewhere for future business. We are not leaving, just to make that point.
But do you, with this message, do you fall on deaf ears in the government? Or I mean, are there people in the government who are actually worried about this growing isolation of China in the world economy?
Yeah, you're closer you are to party and foreign ministry and so forth. Of course, you fall on deaf ear. Actually, they poke fun at me, you know. As I said, European investment has a challenge here. The spokesperson of the foreign ministry said, but you know, European investment went up by 123%. So last night I had a dinner with a former vice minister of foreign affairs, and she was very attentive, wonderful lady. And I said to her, you know, if you are happy with percentages that, you know, we do 8 billion here, then really, I mean, congratulations, but we did 160 elsewhere. You know, you should not be happy. You should be more ambitious. You should be more open. And she really got it, as well as the vice minister of MOFCOM. I was asked to come to the Ministry of Commerce a day after my paper. And of course, I was reminded that this is a sensitive period, party congress, watch your language, you're not very nice to us. But she was attentively listening to what we have to say. And MOFCOM has been a great ally in all of this. So it's not they, all of them, totally not. State Council Development Reform Commission, Mr. Ma Jiantang, as well as Minister Wang Wentao from MOFCOM, open-minded, great people. But boy, you know, they have a hard time selling it upstairs. And so I have great sympathy for these people. And basically by being slightly loud and naughty, I'm trying to make the case that they can sell it upstairs, that actually the aircraft carrier of the Chinese economy is not in ship shape.
I have a question over here.
Clemens Eckert from Swisscom. You mentioned that the world is not willing to invest in China. What do you think is the reason for that, and what could China do to change it?
Well, the world is willing to invest in China. Top 10 Europeans are willing to invest in China. And I checked with Rodion. We have also data set the top 10 of America equally, ExxonMobil and General Motors and Tesla. So there are still, I would say, in essence, across the board, Koreans and others, non-Chinese, about 40 to 50 companies putting in big bucks, and that will remain this way. But again, totally disproportionate to the potential of this economy. And so what can change it is, I can only guide you by pointing at my position paper. On 430 pages, you find 1,000 reasons what they can do about it. Frankly, of course, the essence is opening up again. We had a World Bank study in this position paper, which you can download from the European Chamber website. And no membership required, it's free of charge, we're nice to everyone. So in a way, we have a study in there. China's GDP per capita last year in power purchasing parity was $17,000. You know, they're reaching the middle income step area. And so we looked at, the World Bank looked at the potential that China has in 2050. And there are three scenarios. One is that basically China muddles through, and that's about 40,000, 42,000, I guess. So it's quite nice increase, but reaching the GDP per capita of Europe in the year 2050. US is far away. Then we have China as self-reliance, autarky, everything that we see now. And then China will reach $33,000, so double, but in 30 years. And will way undershoot what Taiwan, the economy of Taiwan, Japan, and Korea have achieved. And already now you can see benchmarking it, that China is falling behind per capita. But then you have this in the study, the opening up, the kind of, really going back to globalization, embracing the foreign business, as well as opening up and doing regulatory changes. $55,000 US, $55,000, like a rocket bypassing Japan, Taiwan, and Korea. So the question we have for the Chinese leadership, it's your country, it's your choice. There are three choices. Would you please take the upper one? Because we make business with you. We want to basically go with you through this success story. So the difference between self-reliance and totally open up by 2050 will be $25,000 per capita GDP. So the question I have for the government is, do you really, for the sake of ideology, want to forfeit, give up $25,000 per capita?
Now, Joerg, if we move to the geopolitical sphere, on February 4th of this year, at the opening ceremony for the Winter Olympics in Beijing, President Xi Jinping hosted Vladimir Putin, and they announced their eternal friendship.
Right.
2 weeks later, Russia invaded Ukraine. And now the two men met again in Samarkand 10 days ago, last week. And it kind of seemed a little frostier then, not so much eternal friendship anymore. Can you give us some color on how the relationship between China and Russia, and also between like the personal relationship between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin has evolved?
Yeah. Well, as you know, Mark, my wife is Russian. Her father was 14 years Russian ambassador here. So I have a bit of an inside view on how Russia is getting treated, as in particular, she's heading a major oil company here from Russia. And my daughter-in-law is Ukrainian, so I have geopolitics at home. Luckily, my wife is with me on how she views this whole incredible war. I really believe, from everything I know from the Russian community, is that Putin did not share the news that he's going to invade. I think also the first 24 hours, China was surprised. It is something that is hard to believe, but I guess they would not have signed this paper with this kind of wording if they would have known that actually Putin really means invasion. Ever since the sanctions on Russia, the sanctions on Russian companies have been severe. Chinese companies have left Russia. Chinese companies that have assets in the US and Europe have really dropped and left. Chinese companies that have no assets, nothing to fear from from American sanctions, actually increased a bit of business. But overall, China has treated Russian companies pretty badly. I really tell you, I know it in-house. I can justifiably say that the family of WUTTKE is being sanctioned negatively. So we are lamenting European sanctions in this way because it's really tough. And people don't see it. China and Russia are not allies. They're aligned. They're aligned in one thing and one thing only, that's in their anti-Americanism. That really is the glue between them. Now, the last thing that Xi Jinping wants to see is that his good friend Vladimir is losing a war. He doesn't want to be associated with a loser. So in a way, it is something where we can definitely see not only the sanctions are tough and remain tough, but also this little distancing, and also people here in Beijing, off the record, close advisors to major government leaders say, you know, that NATO has expanded as a good thing, you know, because Putin has a tendency of invading countries that are not in NATO. So you have this whole balloo about NATO and, you know, we are the reasons for it. But people have been increasing, in particular, of course, the upper class and the elite, be aware of what kind of damage it does. Now, Russia definitely will go down the economic drain and will have a real hard time. And China definitely doesn't want to see that Russia is taking a major hit. At the same time, they're very keen to look at Russian assets to see if they get cheaper over the course of this year in order to then buy into assets in Russia. At this stage, they stay away from that.
Now, of course, given the situation in Ukraine, many people worry about Taiwan now. You know, what is next and what will happen there? How do you see that?
Yeah, it's well, again, for China, it is hard, for Chinese leaders, very hard to understand why Europeans are worried about Taiwan. In essence, also, you know, it's true. I mean, 1 year ago, hardly anybody could pinpoint on the map where Taiwan is. Now everybody can. And again, the point of 45 billion euro is not really widely known, and that we are dependent in Europe on the supply chain on 90% on high-end semiconductors from Taiwan. So Europe has each and every interest to have peace and quiet and open sea lines going into the economy of Taiwan. Again, I really don't see how the Chinese army can actually do an invasion. I really don't see it. They have no practice in a sense. It's a lot of water between Fujian and Taiwan is really heavily armed. And then, of course, the whole thing about Japan and the United States that have an equal share of concern on the security of Taiwan. So if the mainland would decide to go after a blockade, let alone for a destruction of Taiwan, we would really be in a totally different world. I don't see this happening. But at the same time, in private luncheons and private dinners with people here, to a very large extent, I'm really worried about the fact that they believe they can pull it off. And that we have to align it. We don't have to listen to you guys. It's a historical achievement and so forth and so forth. That's something that really worries me, is that they are a little bit delusional of the impact this will have. And when they talk to me, I remind them, if you read novels and history books about Germany in 1912, we had the same language. We had the same language. And the 20th century could have been the German century, and the 21st century could have been the Chinese century. And it's in all their hands to make sure that this does not get busted by themselves.
I mean, kind of, one sees the level of nationalism rising, sort of the jingoistic language as well, towards Taiwan. Now, as far as I'm informed, whenever Deng Xiaoping was asked about the question of Taiwan, he used to answer, "I'm not wise enough for that question. I leave that for future generations."
Yeah.
And Xi Jinping today has made it his personal goal that within his reign, he will solve this question. So in a way, he has bound himself to this question of Taiwan.
Yes. Yeah. Again, I mean, that's a real worry, and I think that's two reasons. One is we should stop poking the dragon here in the eye. It has to be very clear that Europe maintains one China policy. I think there is some gray zones that unfortunately Lithuania moved into and has been unfortunately sanctions really badly, and they don't get lifted, which is a disturbance between Europe and China. But again, poking the dragon in the eye is unnecessary. But at the same time, I think we have each and every right to have closer economic relations with Taipei. And a city I know well, a country it is not, but a region I lived in from 1984 to 85. That we maintain ambiguity to some extent in this kind of status quo. It has served us well over the last years. Why should we change this? And we have to make really sure that Taiwan has the means in order to protect itself, to keep the status of a non-recognized country in a way. And again, I think it is very vital to international leaders to meet Xi Jinping in person. Scholz is coming, Macron is coming. He meets hopefully Joe Biden in Bali. So November is going to be crucial for the president for the first time in 1,000 days to face Western leaders, to hear the message from their mouth. Because the center here over COVID, over this kind of self-induced echo chamber, is becoming increasingly delusional how the world looks like. And it really needs a bit of a reality check. So I mean, in a way, I'm happy that what he said in Samarkand, actually he didn't say it himself. I was astounded to see that Putin was actually leaking it in a way that Xi Jinping had concerns. And Modi gave him a lecture on war in this time. So in a way, I think it's really vital that we stay engaged with China, that our leaders meet him in person, and that we get the message across is that Taiwan is an important part of our supply chain and is an important part of the world. So keep it as it is, status quo.
In a couple of weeks, on October 16th, the 20th Party Congress will take place in Beijing. What are your expectations for that? What should we look for?
Well, certainly no coup d'etat of any sort. No, the president, sure, gets his third term. He will install some of his people. I guess that he might not be able to install all of them. I think there might be some worries in the leadership, and there's still some sort of leadership. It's not just one man. In order to see that the most capable man gets the top job as a prime minister. Prime Minister Li Keqiang will move on, will become head of the parliament. So will be staying as number 2, but of course not as important as prime minister. I hope, of course, that we have Vice Premier Hu Zhenghua as the next prime minister. He's a very capable man. He's a tough guy. He can actually withstand criticism within the system, which is vital. Most people in the last 10 years didn't do that. No, we have to have a more open system here to discuss policy mistakes and discuss what ideology does to the livelihood of this country and these people. Are they able to do that? It's beyond me, I don't know. But definitely the economy takes a hit, unemployment is rising, China is adding problem after problem on its plate internationally. So it's not doing well right now, frankly speaking. So is there going to be a little bit of leniency and going back to the good old days? I don't know. Everything that history books teach us about an administration or a leader, an autocrat maintaining 10 years, that the next 5 years are certainly going to be even more engulfed in security and control and everything. So anyway, I still hope that there will be some individuals that make a difference. But again, the echo chamber is getting tighter. There's increasingly at the top believe their own propaganda, and the people scratch their heads. And I can clearly tell you that more and more people are questioning where China's heading far more than 6 months ago.
If you allow one last question on that very topic, again harking back to Deng Xiaoping, who basically said after the experience with Mao Zedong, we shall never allow a one-person cult to rise within the party or within China anymore. And we kind of have this one-person cult now. How controversially is this being discussed, that this is actually Mao again?
Well, it's not controversial. We discussed there's too much fear of people, suspicious of people telling on them. We are more ridden with fear than any time I was here in 40 years, really. Even after 89, I was here in June 89. After that period of time, of course, it was not nice. But now control is more technical, control is all over the place, and punishment is draconian, you know. But still, in the leadership, in particular in private entrepreneurs, you can sense that people are not happy. The kind of slaughterhouse we had on IT companies, the Jack Ma's, the Robin Ma's of this world last year, they lost billions. And many people that had made a huge difference to the fiber of the Chinese economy, private entrepreneurs bringing new products, new ideas. The future of China was really looking bright, and all of a sudden they get told, you know, common prosperity, and would you please watch what you do? It is in stark contrast to all the rhetoric where they're pouring billions into semiconductors and all kinds of things. But at the same time, they're partly driving their most capable people out of the country. And unfortunately for Europe, they mostly end up in the US and not in Germany or in Switzerland, I guess.
I have one last question here in the front.
Hello, thank you very much. Callum Fletcher from the Europe Asia Company. Thank you for painting such a clear picture of the current situation in China. I'd like to ask you about Russia, since your wife is Russian, your daughter's Ukrainian. Now that doesn't mean that you understand necessarily, or that they understand how Putin thinks, but what do you think, if you were to give an estimate, is he capable of dropping a nuke on?
Oh.
No. Okay.
Well, honestly, my daughter-in-law, my son married a Ukrainian, and we didn't see it coming. My wife didn't see it coming, despite the fact that she knows the president very well personally. She didn't think he's going to do that. Now we are in this incredible situation. And again, she's more worried than I am. I cannot believe that after nearly 80 years, we have the situation that someone might militarily use a nuclear bomb against someone else. I really don't see this happening, but she's really worried. And to my surprise, so was the former Vice Minister of China yesterday evening.
On this very happy note.
Well, he asked for it. Blame him.
May I please remind everyone, what we have here is Chatham House rules. So, you know, also after when we have the panel discussion, we want to be able to speak as openly as possible, also for Joerg here and for the panelists. So please, what is said stays within the room, and please don't tweet it out like in real time. But Joerg, thank you very much for being so open, so candid. All the best to you in Beijing. Thank you for being with us, and we all hope that we'll be able to see you in person, physically, soon again.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Bye-bye, Mark. Bye, Tony.
Take care.
Bye, Patricia. Bye-bye.